Are you getting close to a year and people keep asking when you're going to wean? Or perhaps you're already past that year mark and people keep asking. This is so common. And this week, I actually had an interesting online interaction. I try to be so kind and compassionate to everyone I interact with online that I don't usually have negative interactions online. It's really quite rare. But I reposted a reaction video to my TikTok and Facebook channels. I don't think I put it on Instagram. A reel. And this mom was telling a story about being shamed online for mentioning that she breastfed her daughter until 3 years old. And so I was reacting to that saying, why? For what? It's so normal. And somebody posted underneath my video that there was a kid in her neighborhood who breastfed until kindergarten, and the mom was very weird and he was very weird, and she won't let her kids play with anyone who nurses beyond infancy because it's very strange and it makes the kids very weird. And typically when somebody posts something negative on any of my channels, I take a second to say, can this person be educated? Or is this person demonstrating a fixed mindset and so it's not worth even trying? And I generally just scroll on by and things don't bother me. But I thought maybe this person hasn't learned anything about the biological norm for breastfeeding and weaning. And so I left a short comment just asking a few questions like, I wonder if you've learned about the anthropological and biological norm for how long babies tend to nurse across the world. And I said something like, I bet you know many more people who nurse beyond infancy, but because it's not supported culturally, they do it in secret. And so you don't even know about them. And then she responded, obvious that she had no interest in learning. So I did not continue to engage. But this made me think that it might be interesting to talk about what happens with human milk over the years, over the months and years, and what that means for infants and toddlers and why it might be good for them to continue nursing. And then also a little bit about the anthropological and biological research when it comes to the normal age of weaning. So let's get into it. When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. Having known only a handful of people who had ever done it and only seeing it up close a couple of times, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a childbirth educator, and an internationally board-certified lactation consultant, or an IBCLC. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore the systemic, medical, and cultural barriers that make feeding our babies so difficult, so that you know your baby feeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are. First of all, I want to say that just because something is anthropologically and biologically normal does not mean that is what you and your family are able and supported to do. So I view this as interesting information about what humans have done, knowing that the Industrial Revolution and the advent of the pediatric profession actually made breastfeeding way more difficult. And if you want to truly understand why breastfeeding is so difficult today for so many people and why we cannot meet these biological norms, you can go to my bookshop, which is linked always in the show notes. And right now I have one particular book called The Big Letdown by Kimberly Seals Allers. And you can purchase that book to read more about all of the forces that have made breastfeeding so difficult. So definitely go there. But I want to start actually with a quote from the position paper from the American Academy of Family Physicians, because they brought up an interesting point about the history of breastfeeding. And they said that over the past century and a half, the United States has struggled through periods of time when breastfeeding was not well supported by individuals, communities, or the medical field. And they go on to say in a later paragraph of this position paper, which I'll link in the show notes, by the late 19th century, infant mortality from unsafe artificial feeding became an acknowledged public health problem. Public health nurses addressed this by promoting breastfeeding and home pasteurization of cow's milk. In the early 20th century, commercial formula companies found a market for artificial baby milks as safer alternatives to cow's milk. During this same period, infant feeding recommendations became the purview of the newly organized medical profession, partially because of physician support and a vision of scientific, they have in quotes, infant care. The widespread promotion of formula as a breast milk substitute for healthy parents and babies emerged. Throughout the mid-20th century, most physicians did not advocate breastfeeding, and most parents did not choose to breastfeed. An entire generation of parents and physicians grew up not viewing breastfeeding as the normal way to feed babies. Despite the resurgence of breastfeeding in the late 20th century in the United States, breastfeeding and formula feeding continued to be considered virtually equivalent, representing merely a lifestyle choice parents could make without significant health sequelae. So we can see that these choices that were made and these recommendations that were made in the 19th and 20th century have had long-lasting impacts on how we view breastfeeding in the United States, which then have led to this person who posted a comment on my Facebook Reels, her view of what is normal for breastfeeding. You probably know by now that my number one goal is to reduce stress in the perinatal period. So I am so pleased to announce my new partnership with Feast and Fettle, which is a locally prepared home delivery meal service. I was able to select from a list of delicious meal options that got delivered right to my front door for the entire week. Some of the options I chose were zucchini lasagna, roasted carrots, some challah bread, some pork fried rice. Those are just a few of the choices that we had that we devoured. I highly recommend this service as one way to just get one more thing off your plate so that you can spend more time focusing on your family and less time worrying about all the things that you need to do. Just go to feastandfettle.com, which will be linked in the show notes. And if you use my code MILK, M-I-L-K, you can get $30 off your first week. Let Feast and Fettle do the cooking for you. But we know actually from the anthropological data that there has been a wide range, historically and anthropologically speaking, of what has been considered the normal age of weaning. So Aristotle stated that breastfeeding should continue for 12 to 18 months. I don't know why he always gets brought up. Like, why does he have any say on how long people should feed their babies human milk? But I think this is often noted because he did say it, and it gives us a kind of an idea of what people in his time were thinking about. Mothers in Zulu societies have traditionally breastfed their infants until 12 to 18 months, but that was when a new pregnancy would be anticipated. So weaning was associated with a new pregnancy. Ancient Hebrews, we know, weaned at about 3 years of age, and most children in traditional societies are completely weaned between 2 and 4 years of age. Now, one of the points that the parent made on my Facebook reel was, in underdeveloped places, they need to wean for longer because they have less access to nutrition. there are more diseases, but actually that's not true. The nutritional components of human milk are the same regardless of where you live. And if you go to kellymom.com, there I'll link this as well. It gives some really great information about the benefits of human milk beyond infancy. And we know that in the second year of life, so ages 12 months to 23 months, 448 millimeters of breast milk provide 29% of a toddler's energy requirements, 43% of protein requirements, 36% of calcium requirements, 75% of vitamin A requirements, 76% of folate requirements, 94% of vitamin B12 requirements, and 60% of vitamin C requirements. That's from Dewey in 2001. And we know studies done in rural Bangladesh have shown that breast milk continues to be an important source of vitamin A in the second and third year of life. And often we recommend weaning because toddlers aren't eating that much. And so we think, oh, if you wean, the toddlers are going to eat more. But actually, if we look at what humans have done biologically over time and historically and anthropologically, it would make sense that toddlers sometimes don't eat very much because they have evolved to still drink a lot of human milk, which provides so much of these energy requirements that cow's milk does not provide for them. And so if we think of it in the opposite way, that if they were still taking human milk, then we would not need to be so concerned about their solid food intake because they would still get a lot of what they needed, and then it would complement what they were taking in solidly. And research also indicates that in situations where breastfed toddlers have an increased risk of malnutrition, this often appears to be due to inadequate complementary feeding or reverse causality. In one study of 250 toddlers in Kenya, solid food intake increased after weaning, but not enough to replace all the fat, vitamin A, and niacin that the child had been getting via breastfeeding. And that's a study from Onyango in 2002. So there is a book called Nursing Beyond 1 Year. This author, Sally Neidel, said, some doctors may feel that nursing will interfere with a child's appetite for other foods, yet there have been no documentation that nursing children are more likely than weaned children to refuse supplementary foods. In fact, most researchers in third world countries where a malnourished toddler's appetite may be of critical importance recommend continued nursing for even the severely malnourished. Most suggest helping the malnourished older nursing child not by weaning, but by supplementing the mother's diet to improve the nutritional quality of her milk and by offering the child more varied and more palatable foods to improve his or her appetite. And if you have a toddler that you are concerned about how much they're eating, the theory is that we don't remove the breast milk, which is providing so many good nutritional benefits, but instead we continue to offer them as many varied foods as we can. We continue to make sure that the nutrition from the breast milk is really solid, and we know that they are going to get a lot of nutrition from the breast milk itself. If you want to have less anxiety and more confidence so that your parenting journey can feel like you always wanted it to feel, then go to my website right now so that you can have a person by your side who not only knows how you feel, but who combines my expertise of lactation with your expertise of your body and your baby to help you make the next right step in your lactation journey, because that's all you really need to do is make the next right step. And right now, that next right step is going to my website, www.quabbinbirthservices.com. And I can't wait to see your name pop up in my inbox or on my phone, on my text messages. We also know that the milk content changes over time from infancy to toddlerhood. So in infancy, the majority of the caloric intake is from carbohydrates. But once the child has grown to be a toddler, the milk is significantly higher in fat than the milk received by younger nursing babies. In Nancy Moore Marker's book, Breastfeeding Answers, a Guide for Helping Families, she talks about a study that was done comparing the milk fat content of mothers with nursing babies older than a year and mothers of nursing babies between 2 and 4 months old. And the researchers found that the milk of the older babies was about 50% higher in fat than the milk received by the younger babies. And the same result has been shown in many other studies. We know that this higher fat content is really good for the growing needs of the toddler. Also, there are higher concentrations in toddler breast milk of the total amount of protein, lactoferrin, lysosome, IgA, sodium, and oligosaccharides, which is a milk sugar that feeds the good bacteria in the baby's digestive system. And then we do know that some components do decrease, including zinc and calcium. There is a quote from a researcher, Perrin et al. From 2017 that says human milk between 11 and 17 months postpartum provides equal or greater concentrations of macronutrients and key bioactive proteins compared with mature milk bank samples donated in the first year postpartum. So we know that the milk for a toddler changes to meet their needs, which is another reason why it is not necessary to wean a toddler if everybody in that breastfeeding relationship is still happy with what is happening. The person who posted also brought up other animals and said, animals know when to wean their babies. I don't get why human mothers don't always know when. And so I just wanted to bring up this point that, yeah, animals don't care about what other animals are thinking about them when they're weaning. And so here are the markers, the anthropological and biological markers for when an infant is ready for weaning. And they are this. When an infant reaches 4 times their birth weight, so in humans, this happens at around 2 to 3 years, the age when the infant is 6 times the length of gestation, which for a human, that would be 4.5 years of age, and the age when the molars first erupt. So a lot of people thought that it was canine teeth because this was written in one of those first science-based pediatric books that was written by a medical doctor in the 20th century for parents to use science-backed parenting that really did not have a lot of scientific evidence in it when they were recommending formula instead of breastfeeding. So that's usually years or older, and then age when all of the baby teeth have fallen out, 5 to 6 years or even later. So these are the ages that we are seeing that mammals wean. So if you look at comparative biology, and I'm looking at this from lactationtraining.com, so I'll link this as well. But when we are looking at comparative biology, comparative biologists have attempted to name an age of natural weaning for humans by looking at what other mammals do. And it's so interesting because we see when other mammals wean. So a rabbit weans at around 28 to 35 days. And we think, oh, yeah, that's really short. A cow, it's 180 to 240 days. If we use the markers I just named, when an infant reaches 4 times their birth weight, their length, 6 times their length of gestation, when the molars first erupt, and when the baby teeth have fallen out, actually, baby rabbits double their birth weight in 6 to 7 days. So they are nursing for 4 times that long. And humans double their birth weight on average in 105 to 126 days. So if you multiply that by 4 to keep up with the rabbits, human babies would need to nurse well past their first year of life. And if we look at cows, a calf doubles its birth weight in approximately 36 days, meaning cows nurse 6.5 times as long as it takes to achieve that. So a human baby would have to nurse until about age 2 to reach that mark if we compare to what a cow does, for instance. And then one last interesting fact about animals, which if she had done any Googling at all, she would have found that our closest animal relatives, other primates, nurse their babies for years. And there's a really great 2-minute listen on NPR, Up First, Morning Edition, about orangutan moms. And the title is Orangutan Moms Are the Primate Champs of Breastfeeding. And it says that orangutan moms in the wild supplement young orangutans' diet with breast milk for up to 8 or 9 years, which is very long. And it's part of their survival strategy. But it provides them lots of extra nutrition, just like it does our babies. And so this person who ignorantly posted on my Facebook reel really didn't know what she was talking about. And people who are pressuring you to wean earlier than what you prefer don't know what they are talking about. And so when it comes to answering their questions, you can send them this podcast episode and say, before we have any more questions about this, just listen to this. Or you can just decide that their questions are not worth your time and ignore them. Or you can retort with something like, I don't know, I was thinking maybe we would breastfeed until they go off to college. That seems like a good time to wean. So you get to decide how much you would like to educate people who are pressuring you to wean earlier than what you want. And don't let this podcast episode pressure you to feed longer than what you wanted, because it is very clear that what matters most is that both mom and baby, both parent and baby, are happy with the feeding arrangement. So if you have no longer become happy with your feeding arrangement, then you are very entitled to make changes, because your health and happiness matters too. Are you dying to talk more about some of these interesting findings? Me too. Join my Milk Making Minutes community group, where parents and professionals come together to talk about the systemic barriers that make breastfeeding so difficult and are on our way to making big changes. Join me there. And if you are in those postpartum days, which some studies show last up to 7 years, and you need and deserve a break from cooking, then go to feastandfettle.com, where you get $30 off your first week of home cooked meals delivered right to your front door. And have I said in previous episodes how delicious they are? Because they really are. Check that out. You won't be disappointed. Bye.